Mike damn Pence has decided, yes, he's running for president, but is he though? There's a super PAC who backs Pence. Well, it's pretty brutal what they're doing in the super PAC against Trump. But then Pence, who talks tough on one stage, talks not tough on another. Let's get into it. Here's the commercial.
A president begging him to ignore the Constitution. A mob shouting for him to die. And an anxious nation watching for one man to do what's right. A weak man appeases a mob. A man of courage and character stands up to them. That day, one man failed the test of leadership, while another stood tall. And since then, this so-called leader has continued to abandon our conservative principles. Now, with a woke mob trying to take away our freedom, we need a president who won't flinch, who won't try to cut deals with our values. A president with the courage and the faith to lead us through turbulent times and keep America the beacon of freedom for all mankind. Mike Pence for president. Committed to America PAC is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Mike Pence is strong, a patriot, and willing to stand up to those who oppose him. Here it is.
But the question is, allegation that an investigation into obstruction, which you clearly did not do, if that is something that investigators see as possible, and even enough potentially to indict the former president, do you think that that should go forward?
Well, I would hope not.
I just want to clarify, what you're saying is that if they believe he committed a crime, they should not go forward with an indictment? You just talked before about committing to the rule of law.
Let me be clear that no one's above the law.
Okay.
But with regard to the unique circumstances here, look, those classified, I had no business having classified documents in my residence, and I took full responsibility for it. President Biden had no business having them in his residence from when he was vice president as well. And the same with former President Trump. But I would just hope that there would be a way for them to move forward without the dramatic and drastic and divisive step of indicting a former president of the United States.
Him scared. Think about the irony of this. Hey, Mike Pence, Donald Trump, the guy who tried to have you assassinated, that guy. When he is in fact found, criminally liable, or at least by way of a grand jury, should the grand jury actually indict the former president? Instead of answering the question, because Pence wants you to believe he's a man's man. Instead of just answering the question, he literally invokes that he is a criminal by saying, hey, I had classified documents in my residence and I did not have any business with them at my home. The man cited the law against himself rather than citing the law against the man he's running against. That wasn't the only irony. Here's another one.
Sir, if Donald Trump is convicted of a crime and you're elected president, would you pardon him?
Well, I don't want to speak about hypotheticals. I'm not sure I'm going to be elected president of the United States. But I believe we have a fighting chance. I really believe we do.
And if you are?
And I would hope, again, Dana, you're as persistent as ever. CNN is living up to its reputation. But look, there are real issues the American people are facing. And rather than talking about that.
Sir, you can't get through a soft ass interview on CNN. You expect us to believe that when the doors are closed and the individuals you are talking to have, well, let's say about 1 million times more power than the person on that stage with you, that somehow all of a sudden you're going to find your second wind, your strength will come back. Well, what about this question, since you like policy questions only? Here it is.
I'm going to quickly go back to something you said about expediting the processing of people who engage in mass shootings. A lot of people who are mass shooters, they go in with the intention to die. So how would the threat of execution be a deterrent?
Well, I follow these stories just as closely as you do. And of course, our years in the White House, we saw one tragedy after another. And I know we hear that, and we see evidence oftentimes in the aftermath that they went in without regard to whether they would survive. But I just believe in the deterrent of the law. And I believe perhaps if we made it clear, I mean, think about this. The Parkland shooter is going to spend the rest of his life in jail in Florida. And that's not justice.
Oh my goodness. Do I even need to say anything about that answer that was not an answer? The man looked terrified on that stage. He looked as if Donald Trump was probably right in front of him. All right, that's your guy. Despite recent media attention, Pence has a little chance to actually pull this off. Serving as vice president has typically been a very reliable stepping stone to the presidency. That's the reason he took the job. But that step is looking shakier for Mike Pence, who jumps into the GOP presidential race in a weaker position than almost any other former VP in modern history. An NBC News poll released in April found just 6% of Republican primary voters are saying that they support Pence, while 46% back Donald Trump. Let me tell you why they're backing Trump. They're backing Trump because Trump appeals to the worst inside of them, and the Republican Party has had the worst among them for a very long time. This gives them freedom to come out. Mike Pence, you may be, a decent guy outside of the context of your backwards ideology, but unfortunately you lack courage. You are afraid, you are scared. And in order to actually defeat somebody in a political contest, you must be willing to run against them. Something that you're still afraid to do. Pence, the man tried to have you assassinated, sir. Either sit your ass down or run for president. Do one or the other. All right, Jordan, you have got to be just like, what the hell on the inside? Thoughts?
Yeah, Pence, just like most of the Republican field, remained totally silent until the very last minute of the Trump administration. Every step of the way, when they were ripping families apart at the border and separating kids from their parents, as they were trying to raise taxes on the working class and give a permanent tax cut to corporations, as they were trying to make it easier for oil and gas companies to pollute, as they were chipping away through judicial nominations and Supreme Court appointments at people's fundamental liberties and rights, ultimately resulting in the repeal of Roe versus Wade. Every step of the way, they turned a blind eye. As they waged culture war attacks, social attacks, economic attacks, all of these different types of things, harming people, they were quiet. But then once it impacts them directly, their future professional prospects, or in the case of Pence, potentially threatening him specifically, then all of a sudden it's, I took a stand against Trump's behavior. Did you? No, you waited until the last minute when it actually impacted you. Then you tried to spin it into some boldness and bravery and moment of courage in your campaign ads. So they're gonna turn around in this Republican campaign for president, they're gonna turn around and act like they're somehow different than him after years of enabling him. It's totally bogus. And obviously I know a lot of the viewers will see right through it. I would hope a lot of moderate or swing voters do as well.
Yeah, and somebody needs to find Dan Quayle. Because according to the narrative, Pence called Dan Quayle and said, listen, Dan, and first of all, I didn't even know Dan Quayle was still alive. He said, listen, Dan, I need to know, can I legally do this? Dan Quayle said in absolute terms, no. And if you do, you will be committing a grave felony. You will end up going to prison, Mike Pence, if you do this. So Mike Pence decided not to. The point is, he tried. He wanted to do it. Okay, that's the point.